And the album's slated to be released on, you ready for this? September 11th, 2001 is the release date for Won't Turn Down.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, it's really great, right?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I'm your host, Mike Doyle. And also, happy 2019. Let's get this shit going. Fun Size started more or less in 1991 in Richmond, Virginia. The members consisted of James, Alan, Brian, and Oris. They put out a few releases, including a 7-inch on Fueled by Ramen in 97 called The Process of Selling Out, which was a play on the Black Flag record, The Process of Weeding Out. And was also poking fun at Less Than Jake for recently signing to Capitol after Vinny told James about all of the undeserved flack the band was getting for signing to a major. In 98, they released Glad to See You're Not Dead and disbanded soon after. Thank you, James, for that write-up on your Facebook page that I basically trimmed a lot out of because it was very long. So I didn't really have that much time. Anyway, the band did, however, reunite in 2012 when guitarist Brian moved back to Richmond and they released Since Last We Spoke. If you haven't had a chance to check out this album, then do so because it's really good, especially the song End of the Road, which has been on heavy rotation on my Spotify playlist for fucking months. I met these guys back in 98 on their last tour through New Jersey when my old band Lane Meyer played a show with them at JT Skate Zone in West Orange, New Jersey. We also did a mini tour, I guess if you can call that, with James' second band, River City High, which we also talk about in this interview. I reached out to James through Facebook to see if he'd like to reminisce about 96 to 2002, and he was more than happy to spend 2 hours with me on the phone discussing this time period. And here is what we talked about. Performing as a kid in front of his 5th grade class, did Richmond have hall shows, Tim from Avail's advice on touring, getting signed to Fueled by Ramen, his pen pal in Denville, New Jersey, Matt Redleader, the formation of River City High, Big Wheel and Doghouse Records, dealing with the scene changing in the early 2000s, Brett from the Juliana Theory, Fun Size reuniting in 2012 to record an album and play shows, and a ton more. Now, before we begin, this episode is sponsored by my animation company, Drive 80 Studios. If you're a marketing company in need of someone to turn your graphics into video, then check out my website, drive80.com, and you can see some of my work. Basically, if you are in marketing or you're a graphic designer or whatever, and you guys have a lot of print that you've done for your clients or just static media, like digital media, I can take all that and animate it so you can charge your clients way more money and give them video, which seems to be a hot item at the moment. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can donate as little as $1 a month through Patreon by going to thiswasthescene.com and click on the button at the top of the page that says click here for bonus material. As a patron, you get access to bonus material that I try my best to put on the site that regular podcast subscribers do not get. Or you could do a one-time donation by clicking the donate button that is on the website as well. Or you don't have to do shit. But if you do pay $1 a month, that's $12 a year. And Patreon does take out fees, and so does fucking PayPal. And it does help with, paying for this at the end of the day. $20 a month, which I think I'm making right now. Divide that by the amount of hours that I put into this equals maybe like half a cent an hour. So, yeah. But again, it's totally up to you. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some old school punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Do I say your last name is Menefee?
That's it. You got it.
Okay, cool. Because that was the one thing I've talked about with so many people is that I typically will just call them by their band name as their last name. It would be like James Fun Size or, whoever. But
I always went by James Size.
James Size.
because Tim Avail was always Tim Avail, and he was in the phone book as Tim Avail.
Really?
And I thought that, everyone thought that was the coolest shit ever.
Yeah. I always forget that Avail and Guar are products of Richmond.
They're some of Richmond's biggest exports.
That's amazing. But you are still living in Richmond, right?
I still live in Richmond.
So what's the draw?
I feel like I'm the what's the what?
So it's just like hometown, and it's a cool town.
I feel like I'm the librarian in it. you know, where you're like like everyone comes back and he's still at the library. People, I've been working at the same bar for almost 15 years now.
Oh no shit.
And people will come back in when they haven't been in town for like a decade, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're still here!" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, it's crazy."
Are you is that the hole in the wall where Mark used to own?
No, it is also a tiny place like that, but it's called the Patrick Henry, and
Okay.
but it's like a hole in the wall. The hole in the wall has been that whole area has been absorbed by VCU.
Oh yeah.
Which is the school that's in the city.
Okay.
So the city's changed a lot in the past 15, 20 years.
I've told
everything's subsuming it. What's that?
I've asked everybody about that bar for the last 20 years. Any time someone said they're from Richmond, I'm like, "Have you been to the hole in the wall?" They're like, "I don't know." I was like, "I'm sure it's not there anymore, but."
It hasn't been there since like 2000. At this point, it's been since like 2003, 4.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah, what a great place though. That was a good place.
I know.
So the bar, the bar that I have worked at since then is a lot. It's pretty similar, which is why I've been there forever, because it's also pretty great.
That's awesome.
Except for not a Miss Pac-Man machine.
Oh yeah, that always comes to mind when I think about that bar too.
Yeah, it's a great. I spent a lot of time on that Miss Pac-Man machine. I would love to go back in time and just sit at that Miss Pac-Man machine and just play it for days and days on end like I used to.
There's actually a bar down here right across the street from where I live. It's called Boxcar. It's a barcade, and they've got that game. It's like the table game.
Right.
They have that at their established, that plus like all these old school arcade games. But every time I see that, I always think, I'm like, that was the fucking hole in the wall.
Yeah.
But,
we got one of them barcades here too.
Yeah, they're they make a killing.
It's out of control.
Yeah. So anyone listening, this is James from Fun Size, and Fun Size was a band back in the late 90s, and then you guys dissolved before early 2000, but they recently got back together. I wouldn't say recently, I mean, it was like 2013 you guys did the album?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So I guess that was like technically 5 years ago, but
right.
They were a band that I had heard of through Matt Redleader was our initial label for Lane Meyer, and we were at the record store that he used to work at, which I forget the guy who used to own Go-Kart. It was his record store.
Greg, right?
Greg, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were there doing our layout, and Matt, we're looking through new CDs, and it was like the new arrivals, and your guys' CD was in there. It was Glad to See You're Not Dead, and
right.
So Matt's like, yeah, you got to check this out. So I got that, and then that night, I think, or like that early that morning, we're driving home, and I put it in, and I heard Guidance for the first time, and I was like, holy shit, this song is amazing. And then you guys ended up playing a couple of shows in Jersey, and so I was like, this would be a great. I was like, James would be awesome to talk to because he had Fun Size, and later on did River City High, but I wanted to get his perspective of the late 90s scene because that was his era.
Well, also the parameter, I think the parameter that you kind of laid down for me in terms of beginning and end was like a really perfect time. I think you said originally it was 96 to 2002.
Yeah.
Is kind of where you want to focus. And it's insane that marks the very first Fun Size tour was in 96.
Wow.
And then right when River City High signed to a major was like the end of 2002. So it's like the most like prolific and it's everything that I wanted to do with music, right? Because after 2002, it went to total shit.
Yep, that's basically like what started the conversation about this, of how we all hated where it went.
It really fucking, like, I could not think of a better, more like great time period, because all I have to say about those years are wonderful things.
Perfect. This is great.
And then after 2002, I mean, really, it's like I was like, oh my god, it's like that's when I should have just quit.
Well, it's funny.
Instead, I'm playing a show this Friday night. It's never gonna end.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like that's why people are listening to this podcast. That there's nostalgia to it. That you can't change. You can't change the past. It's locked in. It was what it was. But it draws so many feelings from people from what it was like. Because this is 2 decades ago. So a lot of people listening are probably in their late 30s or early 40s, and they're remembering this time period when they were 17 to 21, 22, talking about that time.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah. Same.
But so as I do in every interview, I want to definitely want to focus on that time period, but I want to kind of bring you up there and get people to know you and start with, as a kid, what got you into loving music?
It wasn't really. The Beatles were the first thing that I just took to, and it was really it was just kind of ordained that I was just going to always love music. So I've been reading a lot the past couple years. I've really just constantly been reading books, and I read about writers all the time. And usually the bios of writers are they always talk about how I would make up stories on walks, and then I would come home and write the stories down. And that's how I know I'm not going to ever be a writer, because since I was like a child, I would write songs and write and make them up, and just I would just, it was just not a question whether or not I was going to be into music. It was just how quickly was I going to start learning how to play an instrument.
Do you remember just that moment when you were a kid? Because I've talked to a couple people, and they're like, well, I kind of just fell into music. And a couple interviews recently, they said that. But I remember as a kid watching bands and just wanting to be on stage as a rock star. Did you like find yourself wanting to be on stage?
There's so many examples of this when I was a kid. I mean, the first time, I remember when I first heard that first Beatles, the Beatles records that came out it was like the 62 to 65 and 66 to 69 comps. So the blue and the red albums that were really big when I was a kid. And my dad first put that on the record player, and I lost my mind. I couldn't handle how cool it was. and then he bought me just a tape recorder, and I would just hold it up to the speaker and then like try to sing over top of it, and then take it in my room and like sing over top of, just make songs, and then just try to, but never being satisfied with how it sounded. Still to this day, I'm the same way. No matter what, I can't ever get the recorded thing right. There's that, and then there was the dawn of MTV. So I think the first video I can remember seeing is "Vacation" by the Go-Go's, which is awesome.
Oh yeah.
And I love rock and roll. So those are the two videos that I can remember seeing, which are great because it's both female fronted stuff.
Yeah.
Which I've always loved female fronted bands. So it was great that was like the first thing that I saw. Other than the Beatles, it was just awesome ladies rocking out.
I love that you said Joan Jett, because I remember when I was little, my sister had this like weird, there was like these old, I don't know, did you have this? It was like a box that was a record player. So these tiny 7-inches, and you'd open the box top, and you'd have the records in there, and then you'd put the record on the turntable and play it. Did you ever see this?
No, that sounds great though.
It was so fucking cool. So my sister I would play Joan Jett all the time. So when you said that, I mean, just totally connected right there. Like, oh my God, I remember that song. It was so like, wow, this is like rough, and she's hot, and I don't know what hot is yet, because I'm like 7. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, there was that stuff, and then basically any time there would be a live music performance anywhere, I would just be staring at it and amazed, and then I always just wanted to be in front of people and playing music. So when there would be any type of talent show, I would try to put something together so I could play this talent show.
Did your parents ever catch that? Like, did they notice that when you were a kid?
Like, my parents were. It's weird because they were kind of slow to pick up on it. I mean, they gave me piano lessons and eventually and I think that they were not really prepared for like a kid who wanted to play music.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was real foreign to them. Neither of them were that way. My dad loved music, and my dad's saying he loved to dance. Like that was his deal. He was a dancer.
Oh, nice.
But he could never really play anything. And nobody in my family, in any of the immediate family, and my grandmother has a really great voice, and she is a singer and would sing at weddings, but nobody would play an instrument. no one really knew how to deal with it. So,
Okay.
so it was just like I kind of like had to forge this road. I had to really like fight kind of some, I guess, ingrained sensibilities that musicians were bad.
So was it like when things would come up in school or high school, like plays or choir and stuff? Did you see that as an opportunity, or just stay away from that stuff?
Oh well, yeah. Well, by high school it was all I was already punk rocker, so no plays or anything. But middle school I was still like a
Fuck that
awkward kid. So yeah, like I remember I think the very first thing I ever did in front of people was we played. I assembled two friends of mine and my brother to play drums, and we did the Dion and the Belmont song, I Wonder Why. So I started out loving just like 50s rock and roll and doo-wop stuff when I was a kid. I loved Buddy Holly, and I loved mostly Buddy Holly. It was mostly Buddy Holly. And then I love Dion and the Belmonts. And so I always loved vocal harmony. I love the Everly Brothers. And we did this talent show. I'm like in 5th grade.
I can't wait.
playing Dion and the Belmonts, I Wonder Why, in front of like my 5th grade class. And it's the strange. I mean, I'm sure it was totally strange for teachers to see the kid doing this, but I arranged the 3-part harmonies myself, and it was like I remember the first time my friends and I sang it together on my back porch. I felt like I had I'd hit like the Jesus note or something. Like I'd never harmonized with 2 other people like that, and like the effect was so magnificent that I was like, I have to do this all the time. This feels great. Just being in sync with like other people and being able to sing like that was. I mean, there wasn't really a culture for that in my suburban town. I wasn't exposed to. People around me weren't going to shows yet. I just wasn't in with any type of like. I didn't know that other people played music. It was that kind of thing. I didn't know it was real.
Do you think the draw was more towards the music part of it or the performance part?
It was both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like what? Because Richmond was. In the late 90s, definitely had I thought was a really good scene, and so like leading up to that in 96. How old were you in 96?
17 and 18. Yeah.
So you had just basically got out of high school then, right?
Right. I was in high school, like senior year of high school and first semester of college.
So how did you what came first, getting into the local scene or starting a band and then having that get you into the scene?
So we started Fun Size.
So that was like your first band was Fun Size.
Yeah. No yeah. And I was 12 when we started Fun Size.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
But it was me and Alan and Brian, or Alan, Brian and I, whatever. And we were still playing I was playing keyboard. And I hadn't even started playing bass yet because I didn't even know what a bass guitar was. And we were playing like House of the Rising Sun, stuff like that, right? And
okay.
and I'd written my first song, and it was just like, I mean, it was like this pop ballad on keyboard, and then Alan, who had been to Wisconsin and had moved back, had been exposed to punk rock. And he kind of urged me to start listening to newer music. Because I like I said, it was only at the time I was just listening to like what at the time was considered oldies. So it was just basically 50s rock and roll. Okay. And so I heard Descendants, I Don't Want to Grow Up. And the style of music that Alan was exposed to when he was in Wisconsin was this kind of like the SST Cruise Records thing. So it was like Doughboys, Descendants, all Big Drill Car, Chemical People, the specific style of like melodic, punk rock.
Uh-huh.
And it worked really well with me because I really loved like the Beach Boys, and I could hear a lot of harmony in this, and it was kind of like a perfect gateway to punk rock. It was like angsty teenage boys like whining about girls kind of thing. It worked out really well.
Did you play bass from the beginning, or did you?
Well, so I was playing keyboards, and then as we started listening to I started listening to more aggressive music. I realized that there was really no room for me to play piano and sing. I couldn't really figure out where this was going to go.
I mean, unless you're became like Nine Inch Nails eventually.
Right, exactly. So we found a cheap 6-string electric, and I strung it just with the bottom 4 strings because I didn't know that bass was different than guitar.
Okay.
So that's how I started playing bass. Then eventually I discovered that bass was its own instrument. And I just assumed that it was tuned the way it was tuned, but I didn't really know because no one had ever explained it to me. And then I went up to this guy one time who was playing a neighborhood block party, and I asked him how to tune his bass, and he told me, and I was like, I knew it. I'd figured it out on my own. and that's when I really I got a bass for my 13th birthday.
Awesome.
And so then we had like a couple name changes, but we ultimately became Fun Size around when I was 13, 14 years old.
And this is kind of the generic question to ask, but it's always just fun to know what actually landed on Fun Size. How'd you land on that?
It was the candy bar.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you guys are trick or treating, and it was always the best size to get.
Yeah, yep. And we were children, and I ate candy all the time because and so it's wired. And obviously, the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna go with what you know. So I saw the candy bar. Here we go. Names are so strange. They just stay with you forever.
Yeah, but it's also what I've had this conversation a couple times, and you never want to have a name that was embarrassing to tell people, because it was just they were like, oh, what's the name of your band? You're like, but if you were like, I feel that Fun Size would have been easy. It's pop. It just kind of rolls off the tongue. It's pretty out there. It's like, oh, it's Fun Size. Be like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. The only thing I had to fight over the years was that I had to try to prove that it was 2 words. No one would everyone always wanted to make it 1 word. It always bummed me out so much.
I actually,
why are you gonna make this 1 word?
When I was doing some research for this, I kept putting it together, and then that actually stood out to me. I was like, oh shit, I should put this as 2 words, because it made a big difference through the Google search when I did that.
So that once we had a band, and then we started playing more. We started playing pop punk rock. I started meeting other people that were also playing music, and then that's when you start hearing about shows, and I went to my first show, and I could not believe that there was somebody with a Descendant shirt on at the show. I wanted to walk up to the person and talk to them, but I was so scared because it was just I was terrified of the people. Yeah. I thought that I was going to get killed in a way. It was my first time really going into the city to see a punk rock show. So I was simultaneously allured and terrified.
Were the shows back then? A lot of places or suburbs had local shows in Legion Halls and Elks Lodges and churches. Was Richmond just clubs, or did they also have? Yeah, we never, aside from a battle of the bands that was a thing that we all did when we were kids that was at a church. Yeah. We did not have what Jersey had. We did not have this these massive scenes of fire halls and VFWs. Richmond was only clubs. Yeah. Okay.
There were some house shows, and house shows had become a thing again. But that was there was still really the only way to play shows in Richmond was at the time only clubs. Yeah. No one would. It was that whole renting a hall thing never happened down here.
That's so crazy to hear.
Yeah, the first time I was exposed to it was all the times we would play Jersey.
That's all. Did you guys? I mean, obviously, I'm going to jump forward a little bit and come right back. But when you guys were in, Fun Size, I don't think you guys did that many tours before you broke up. And then River City High, you guys toured a lot through the years. So you guys obviously played Chicago a lot,
right?
So Chicago was that was another place where there was just suburban areas and Legion Halls and things but
Right.
I can't remember pinpoint any other places that had that. I guess
Man, I would love to have played those shows in Chicago because we always got stuck playing the Fireside, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So we had some of the. I I never got to play any of those really wonderful suburban wonderful things in
They were sick.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I always got stuck,
Oh,
quote unquote stuck.
well, I
playing
mean, the
Fireside.
Fire that's a pretty good place to get stuck. Like that or the Metro.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we're playing
Yeah.
the Metro again. You're like, Jesus,
Right,
that's
right,
amazing.
right, exactly. We ended up having some River City had some awful Fireside shows, just terrible. One time, Mark's blew his crotch out right on the very first note of the very first song. We had to stop because his balls were hanging out.
Wait,
I mean, it was
what?
it was always a disaster every time. We played there once on like the 4th of July. There was no one there. I mean,
Oh,
every
man.
Fireside story I have is pretty bad except for, you know, 2 or 3.
Well, the fact that you got to play there, even that, like, I think we did a max of maybe 3 shows there, and it was always like, I mean, it was always fucking epic. Just 300 kids come up out of nowhere, and you're like, none of you guys know who the fuck we are, but that's pretty bad if someone's balls just got blown out of their pants.
Yeah, yeah. First song, 1, 2, 3. I think on the 3rd stick click, his balls popped out, and and poor dude just put his guitar down and ran off stage and went outside, and we had no idea what happened. And he came back on, put his guitar on, and we picked right back up where we started. It's wonderful.
Holy shit, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not for him, but
Right.
So okay, so like what specific? Do you remember like the specific like punk band that got you into and like wanting to go in that direction for writing music and listening to music at that time?
Right. Yeah. It was. There would be 2 bands probably. It would be the Descendants and the Doughboys. I don't know. Do you know who the Doughboys are?
I've heard of the Doughboys plenty of times, but I've never actually sat down and listened to them.
Right. Yeah. I loved and love that band very much. And the Descendants it's crazy. Like Descendants are like a fine wine for me. They just get better as I get older.
Yeah.
I just really love that band very much, and I like them even more now in my ancient advanced age, even than when I was a teenager. The Doughboys are just like a really great melodic, power pop band, and for some reason their songs just really like. I just think that I always thought that they were just great. They're kind of hard rock at times. But it was an aggressive melodic form of pop rock, basically. I've always been mostly just into songs. So it's like I've always liked just songs, harmonies, and shorter, and I've never really been into like anything jammy. So all these things fit perfectly. They were all like the 50s kind of like rock and roll thing where it was like
packaged up and right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always hate it when someone's like, yeah, we're gonna get together. I'll tell people I play guitar, bass. They're like, oh, we should get together and jam. Like, I don't fucking jam.
I wish I were that. Yeah, sometimes I wish I were that adept. But I've always found that seems to not really work out that well. Also, I've never been a big like pothead. If I smoked a lot of weed, maybe I would be totally into the jamming. I don't know.
So when you guys, what was your first show? Like your first Actually, yeah. Like, what would be? I mean, even if it's a disaster, what was your first show? Where was it at?
So I mean,
what would you consider an actual show?
Right. I'd say like the first time we ever played Twisters,
okay.
which is the club in Richmond that we played all the time. That's still there. It's called Strange Matter now, and it would have been Valentine's Day 1993.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the first fun size show. However, we were called Green Room at the time.
Okay.
and we went under that name for about like 5 months until someone was like, obviously, like, that's too close to Green Day. Green Day had not yet put out Kerplunk. So this is like, had not put out Dookie yet. It was pre-Dookie Green Day. So they were starting to get bigger, and someone eventually pointed out that was a bad idea to have the same name. And it was such a good advice we took because like 4 months later they actually did completely blow up, and it would have been really embarrassing to have a name that was that similar. We were also huge Green Day fans.
Yeah,
obviously. So that would have been just completely strange.
It's funny you said that because I was doing some research on Twisters because, like I said in the beginning of the interview, we played there, and
right.
For years I've been trying to remember what the hell the name of this place was because I just remembered it being like this 6-foot tall stage. From what I remember, yeah.
It's not. Things are always when you look back on it, your memory doesn't serve you very well. Things are a lot bigger and
way bigger,
larger. Yeah, like Twisters to me when I was a kid always seemed like it was massive, and I go into it now and I'm like, this is so tiny.
But just the height of the stage. Was it like a high stage, or am I just?
It wasn't that tall. No,
really. I even said it. I think I said it to someone recently. Like, oh yeah, it's like a 5-foot tall stage. I was like, yeah, right.
I don't remember it being that tall.
Well, you're also a tall guy, so maybe it's like
right. Yeah. Come on, man.
But
6'2".
it's taller than me. So.
Don't come at me, stage.
It was like up to like my eyes when I was walking up to it. There's a video on YouTube that it's funny you mentioned Green Day from them in '93 playing at Twisters.
Yeah, I was there. So I was.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in 9th grade, and I was sitting right in front of Mike on the stage. Something that you can see me in some of those videos.
Holy shit.
And it was like that was a life-changing show. As you can see, there weren't that many people there, and they also played Longview when I've seen the videos since, and I'm like, they played Longview that night. That's insane.
That's crazy.
And it's just crazy because no one really knows it. I mean, it was right after Cripple came out, and no one's really paying attention, and they're playing this song that would ultimately be this like massive breakthrough for them. But It's so nuts when you see these videos on YouTube where it's like the first time Smells Like Teen Spirit was played live. I've seen that Nirvana video a few times, and it's just chilling to see something that becomes this thing. And right when you just put it together, no one really knows it, and they're just playing a song.
Yeah, and they never, and like you don't think that at that moment when they're watching it that they get that gut feeling that you eventually got later on listening to it.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, that's a nice song, and it's just kind of background music. So around this time, you're seeing these bands, you're watching Green Day play, Twisters. You guys are starting to play there. Like, I'm guessing you're like kind of getting close to getting out of high school. So like, what's going on in your head at this point? You're like, I'm in a band. I'm going to Twisters. I want to be in a band. Like, I'm just gonna fucking go for it.
Right. Well, so the coolest thing one of the coolest things that happened to me musically was we knew that we needed to go on a tour.
Why'd you think of that?
I don't know. because that's what you did. You know, it's like you play shows, and we played our first show out of town, which was in Roanoke, with this band Swank, who were this wonderful group of dudes, and they're playing shows again now too, actually. They were like this. Swank was always hard to describe. They were like a ska, punk, funk, crazy. They had horns. They were they were this like crazy mesh of things, but they're great. Yeah. And they had built a scene in Roanoke, and they invited us over. We played our first show out of town. We were transfixed with this idea that we could like drive places and play music, and going on tour and making a tape are like the only things that you think you can ever do in bands when you're a kid. There's the two big goals, right? Yeah. Make a tape, go on tour.
Oh yeah.
So
get the merch.
Right. So we were like, we got to go on tour, and I went over to Tim from Avail's house, and we had like an afternoon meeting, which is he probably doesn't ever remember, but it changed my life because I went over to his house and we laid out an itinerary. I told him I wanted to go out of town for 2 weeks. It was starting the day after I graduated from high school, and I had the days already figured out. So we just went through, and he's like, when we go out for a 2-week tour, this is what we do. And we play these cities. And we looked at a map, and he laid it out with me. And then he gave me some contacts, and we had already been on a couple comps at that point, and we had other bands on the comps that were from out of town. So I just started filling in the dates with some of the contacts that Tim gave me and some people that I had met so far playing shows around Richmond.
So you're getting advice from Tim. I'm guessing you guys became friends just through the scene or like growing up. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, friends enough. We were never like super, super close, but obviously he knew us because the scene was a lot smaller and we were children. So, he was like, here's this 17-year-old band, and they're obviously interested in doing stuff, and he's always been great with helping out stuff like that. So
that's pretty awesome. So you sit down with him, and he's like, okay, here. So it's just like, I'm just trying to just imagine that, because Veil was such a big fucking band in the scene.
I know.
And then and he's just like, yeah, this is how you do it. And you're kind of like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because it's like so self-evident at this point, how to do it. But you can imagine, 1996, it was 95, 96, you're 17, you live in Richmond, Virginia. There's no internet yet. How the hell do you go on tour? And so he just blasted open this door for me.
What was what was the actual what's the word? Step by step that you saw from it? Like, what did he show you? Just like, here's a map, here's how you find numbers, and
he was just kind of it had never really made sense that you could lay out. It didn't make sense yet until someone showed me how you just had to go jump from city to city, and what was a achievable distance, so you didn't really know. Like, I was like, can I go Houston to Minneapolis? You're like, no, you can't do that, it's too far. So Tim's like, you want to do this, and he's like, and this is, and you're going to want to play Pensacola, but it's a 9-hour drive to Tampa. It's a really long drive, and it's even in a different time zone. And you're like, what? He's like, yeah, but it's worth it, because there's nothing else between, we tried, and there's nothing else really between Pensacola and Tampa, and it's like, and so he basically laid all this expertise on me.
Wow.
And I just soaked it up. It was like, this is crazy. And when I left his house with this piece of notebook paper that had 16 dates on it, it seemed achievable to me, and I was like, this is crazy. This can actually happen.
Wow.
And we booked it, and I graduated from high school, and the next day everybody went to their beach weeks, and I went on my very first tour.
Holy
and
shit.
This would have been, it was June 17th, 1996.
Wow.
Yeah, it was awesome. And we everything happened on that tour that needed to happen. We broke down, had to get towed, missed a show.
Did you show up and no one was there?
We had in terms of that, it was all right. We dealt with we never played to no one on that tour, because I had set it up pretty okay. I mean, I'm not saying that we played for lots of people. We definitely showed up somewhere, and the venue got moved. So it got moved to a storage shed.
Yep.
So we played the storage shed. So yes, and there was no one there. Okay, right. So yeah, we played a couple no one there's. But it was everything was there that everything happened that needed to happen on that tour to prepare, someone for a life of playing music, which they should have run right after that and stopped doing it. So I should have come home and cried and been like, I'm never doing this again.
I don't know, man. Like, after when we went on our first tour, I just remember it was a week, and it was in the summer, so it was hot as hell. We had a van with no windows, and we'd show up, we'd be so tired, but as soon as we got back, I'm like, I want to do that again.
Yeah, same.
There was just some stupid thing about being young, and you're like, this is my ticket to just leave all the time and witness everything.
Yeah. It was a chance to just get out of town and hang out. And we were all best friends at the time, as you are, when you're 17. And Alan and I had been friends since I was 4 years old. So you're your lifelong best friend. I mean, you can't really think of anything better to do with someone you've known at that point your entire, your whole life. And he and I are still best friends. So
that's good.
It helped with my parents that he was with me, because he was older and seemed to be responsible, and so that kind of assisted the process. But it is presumptuous to think that I was able to pull that off at 17. Booked an entire tour. There were no cell phones, so you have to just tell your parents, like,
calling
card. I call you.
Yeah,
calling card. Peace.
Yep. Was it in a van? Did you guys use a van? Did you guys drive your cars?
We had a conversion van that we got from Brian's mom, our guitar player's mom. And we had that all the way through the first River City High tour, actually. and it was that thing that did very well. It was one of those conversion vans that had like carpet and an extended top. And we built a loft in it, of course.
Yeah, they had the loft.
And yeah, right. And it was it served. Believe it or not, it served us well. And as a matter of fact, we did some of the shows we did. River City did with you. We had that because I remember being in that van outside of Matt Red Leader's house in Connecticut. Sleeping in the van because there were like 3 bands worth of dudes inside and everybody was snoring and I couldn't handle it. So
I remember that. Holy shit, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I walked in and it was a room of like 25 dudes snoring and I was like, this is awful. I can't sleep here at all. So I went out to the van and I slept in the van with the door open because it was this bucolic Connecticut wonderfulness.
Oh yeah, didn't their like yard have this like backyard?
It
looked like Mr. Miyagi's backyard.
Creek like went through the damn house. I mean, it was unbelievable.
It was incredible. We walked in. Like, this is like Shangri-La. Fucking great.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And even I was too dumb to really appreciate things when I was a kid, and I still was able to appreciate it.
Oh yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. Especially from all like some of the shitty places you'd end up sometimes. You walk in a place like this has a river going through it. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
How soon after you started touring did you guys get signed by Fueled by Ramen?
We did Fun Size did 5 tours total, and
like total in existence or total before you got signed?
5 tours total in existence.
Okay.
And then other than that, we played a lot of shows in between, of course. But I handed Roger, the bass player, I gave him a demo of 4 songs, and he handed it to Vinny, and Vinny called me and asked me if we wanted to put out a 7-inch. It was that simple. I couldn't believe that. It's hard to even that even happened when I tell the story, but
that's crazy.
It worked the same way that old stories work, where you give someone a tape and they hear it and they like it. I mean, it was like I can't believe that it was that easy. So we didn't even have to necessarily leave town to get on Fueled by. Vinny just heard the tape and he liked it, and we put out our first 7-inch. Now that 7-inch was our second tour. Was like the 7-inch was like the tour 7-inch was like the second tour, so it helped that we'd already had our second tour was being planned. But when the full length happened, our 4th tour, we were in Florida, and I told Vinny that we had a bunch of songs. He's like, let's do a full length, and I'm like, that's awesome.
Wow,
we've got plenty of songs. It's time for our that would be our second record. So that's when at that point John had come on board, who is now head of Universal.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So John Janik and Vinny, who partnered up for Fueled by, I was talking mostly to John because Vinny was always gone. So John and I were talking on a daily basis at the time, and John was just a student at UCF Gainesville. Now he is
now he's printing money.
Yeah. He's the president of Universal, I think.
Jesus. What was so where did you guys record that record?
Glad to See You're Not Dead.
Yeah.
We did that in New Jersey, actually, believe it or not.
Really?
So Fun Size was always big fans of this band called The Fiends.
Yep. Oh, wow. You know The Fiends?
Love The Fiends. Whacked is one of my favorite records of all time.
Holy shit. That's crazy. Yeah. They're like still playing too. Go on.
I know. It's fucking beautiful. Jerry's awesome. I mean, his voice and his guitar playing are great. I love that guy's songwriting. And when we were kids,
I was not expecting you to say that at all. That's so crazy.
Right. So we loved the Whacked record like so fucking much. We were massive fans of this record, and as happens when you start to love something, eventually you just kind of like, we got in touch. I remember somehow I don't even remember. I ended up calling up Jerry and talking to him on the phone all the time. So we became friends, and at that point they had started recording. They had this really good friend who owned that studio. Big Blue Meanie was the name of the studio.
Oh yeah,
that guy Tim. And Jerry's like, we do all these records now with this guy named Tim. Would you like to would you guys be interested in recording up here and I'll produce it? And we were like, fuck yeah, So we did half the record we did at this studio in Utica called Ack Rock.
Okay.
And the thing about that studio at that time was Weston Got Beat Up was recorded at Ack Rock.
Oh shit.
And I liked that record. Still also love that record very, very much. So we did half of it there, and we did half of it at the Big Blue Meanie. Now, Big Blue Meanie eventually moved to this massive facility, and they got this massive Neve board, and that's when they started pumping out the Thursday records that got huge.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, they were in this like tiny studio in Hackensack. So I was always going up to Jersey for whatever reason. There was always there's lots of Jersey going on.
I wasn't expecting this because Richmond's about a four. No, that's more than that. It's like
4.5. It depends on what part of Jersey you're right, and how bad traffic was. Traffic wasn't that bad in the 90s, so
yeah,
you could do it pretty fast.
Yeah, not like DC is now, which is the worst thing in the fucking world.
So you could do. So I had like. Jersey's the first place I ever drove out of town to. I had a friend named Kim who lived in a town called Denville in North Jersey.
Get the fuck out of here. My God, that's crazy. I didn't realize you knew so much Jersey.
Yeah. So we were like pen pals. So there's this whole thing that happens at the time, pre-internet, everybody's just like writing letters to each other. I had these pen pals all across the country. There were like different pockets of scenes: Memphis, Atlanta, Houston, and Jersey. And Kim was like a really good friend of mine, and we rode back and forth. And I'd always, we were like, let's hang out. Like it was totally wonderful and platonic and great. And the spring break 11th grade, my parents let me drive. It's crazy, to Jersey and hang out with Kim for my whole spring break.
Oh my God!
And I did. And we went to I went to New York City for the first time. And anyway, so
wait, what year was that? What year was that?
That would be 95. So that was like that was.
So you went to Denville, New Jersey in 1995. You were in the city. The city is the city, but like, do you remember any other place in New Jersey that you went to and did something? I'm just like, I really want to map this out in my head.
We did. There was an Avail show, coincidentally, that I went to up there, and that and Chisel opened, and I love Chisel as well. So that's just this wonderful show that I got to see, and that would have been. I don't think it was it was not at the Wayne Firehouse, I don't think.
No, that all started in like 96, 97.
Right,
like
so it was
97.
just before that. Yeah. But I don't know where that show was. I feel like it might have been in Passaic somewhere, but I couldn't say for sure.
Okay.
Wow. Right. And then the Fiends also played a hall show while we were up there too. So I just basically went to Jersey and went to New York City and went to shows, and listened to WFMU and thought it was all the coolest thing ever. so I was always going to Jersey. So then Fun Size goes to Jersey, and if we spent a week up there for the next spring break, which is spring break 97, and that's when we record Glad to See You're Not Dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Real quick, the cover art, there was a compilation that came out in like 98 or 97. It was The Actuality of Thought. And it was focused primarily in North Carolina and Virginia, where they took all the footage. And there's like Jejun's on there. Get Up Kids are on there before they even, I think, right when 4 Minute Mile came out. So there's all these like just obscure bands, but this one place they played at had looked like this like Coca-Cola machine behind it and this small stage, and the cover of Glad to See You're Not Dead, it's you guys are playing in front of that, like you're playing on that stage. Do you remember that club?
Right. Yeah, very well. Yeah. It's called the Lizard and the Snake is where it was. It was in Chapel Hill.
That's in Chapel Hill?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And it was a tiny stage. And the guy that kind of laid out the record for us, there was a label. His name was Sean. The label was called Pointless, and his name was Sean. And
wow.
And he ended up playing. What did Sean do? He was like one of Sean's big claim to fame was he was the cover. He was on the he was the cover model on that Mile Marker record. I don't know if you remember that band Mile Marker.
No.
Okay, right. So this is
good for him though.
Yeah, good for him. He looked great on the cover of this record. These dudes were all from. They ended up kind of in the Chapel Hill area, but they were all from the Havelock, New Bern area that just got pummeled by that storm.
Yeah.
and then they all moved to Chapel Hill, and they had a band called the Scaries, and
I think I've heard of that.
And yeah, so there you go.
Okay.
Lizard and the Snake.
Yeah, you should check it.
Please.
So go on. You said please.
Yeah, I could. I'm just saying, please edit all this horrible shit out. Me discursively talking about all these people, because I obviously can go on forever about all of them.
Oh no, I'm gonna keep all this. I mean, all this stuff stays. I mean, I just recorded the end of the season finale of episode 1, and I've got all these season 2 interviews, but it's like 3 hours long. And it's like Chris from Lane Meyer. He's talking to me, and he's like, "We're gonna edit this out." I go, "Fuck no, this is all staying in." No, it's perfect, man. It's a podcast. It's all about talking. This isn't polished. Because if you had a chance, check that out, because actually the Promise Ring in that video, they're playing on that stage, and I've always wanted to know where this is, and I always thought it was in Virginia for some reason, but
nice.
I didn't realize it's 30 minutes down the road in Chapel Hill.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, Lizard and the Snake, Chapel Hill.
Oh my god, crazy.
It was like a block from that. All I can remember was when you come into town, there's that movie theater on your right, and it's like, then you make your first right after that, and it was like on the right. So it's wherever that is.
I'm gonna totally go there. I have a friend who lives out there, so ask her. But all right.
Yeah.
Now you get the album, and then you guys, what tour was it where, I don't know if you're gonna be able to remember this, but when we first met you, we played at JT Skate Zone in West Orange, New Jersey. I think it was in '98, I believe, because it was right before we were gonna go on tour, or I think it was right before. It was the summer we were gonna go on tour. Because that's when we had recorded our first EP, and Matt gave me your CD, so I heard of you guys, and you guys showed up. I was like, "Oh, you got to fucking play Guidance," and you didn't play Guidance, and I was so mad because I remember like talking to you, and I was like, "You guys gonna play that?" You're like, "Yeah, we don't play that. We're not playing on this tour or something." Like, why didn't you guys play that song? It sounded like you had stopped playing it for some reason.
I remember that tour, and that would have been our last.
I think it was your last tour, yeah.
Tour, or was that? Do you remember if we were with the Parasites or were we with Ben Grimm?
You were with Ben Grimm.
Okay, so that's crazy. That was Fun Size's official, last hurrah. I mean, that would have been like, we had like a few more shows after that, but we were in turmoil at that point.
Why? And, what was going on in the band?
It sucks so much. So we had done we did a full U.S. tour that summer. First time we'd been to California. We were gone for 2 months.
Wow.
And then we had another leg of that tour planned because we couldn't get down south. So the idea was to come home for a bit, and then we would go down south, and then we would play, and then we would go up north some and play those Jersey shows. And the shows headed down south. We had van problems again. Immediately broke down before we even made it to the first show. Just like and then everybody was kind of like a little burnt, I guess, and people were not really sure. Everyone just kind of was like, they had jobs, and everyone's focus was like scattered. And what should have happened was we needed someone to kind of like come in and be like, this is like, you can take a couple weeks off, whatever, but like, there's no reason why you should break up. Like these are all problems you can solve.
Yeah.
But we never really had anybody that kind of would have done that for us. And there was just a little bit of, there was like a dedication thing. Vinny from Less Than Jake and also from Feel By kind of presented like these 5 shows that Fun Size could have done that would have been these really great shows, and for some reason somebody couldn't do it, and I had to tell Vinny that we couldn't do it because of someone's job, and he was kind of like horrified because they were like great shows. And he was like,
yeah.
why can't you do it? He was like, what's the problem? These are great shows. Which I understand he should have done that, but like, he also should have been like, do these shows, dumbass.
Yeah.
Do what you have to do these shows.
I live on the road. I'm Vinny from Less Than Jake. You fucking
yeah, exactly.
show up.
And it's like, it just, there were these like, we kind of hit a wall, and we didn't really know how to move past it, and it just seemed like an impossible task. And so it's just it was just like it was like they were just girlfriends and jobs and and there were also like there were some performance issues in the bands. Some people thought other people couldn't play as well, and just like it's just
typical band shit.
Yeah, typical band shit. You start off, start a band when you're 12, and by the time you're 19, you've kind of like you really are at a precipice. You're like, who is gonna keep doing this and who isn't going to, right?
Yeah. So
it was just we had all these questions and no one really knew. We didn't really have very many answers and so we just kind of like we pulled the plug. So that Jersey show, we probably were like not communicating very well, and someone probably had decided that they didn't want to put Guidance on the set list. So
no, I specifically asked you to play it, and you were like, "Yeah, we don't play that song." I was like, "God damn it!"
I know that sucks. So what an asshole! How hard was it just to play it?
No, but you were like super nice. You weren't like being a dick. You were just like, "Yeah." I mean, I remember when I met you, you were like super friendly, and I was like, "Wow, this guy is cool. I like this band. That James is super nice." I never got a chance to really talk to anybody else. I got a chance to talk to Alan, especially because you guys had come back up. Well, I'll talk about this in a bit about with River City High because he started off drumming for that, and but you're like, we don't. You're like, sorry, dude, we don't play it. And I was like, son of a bitch, but I was like, that's right. My favorite song. But you guys were pretty fucking big in Richmond around this time, right?
Yeah. So we at that point we had really started to actually have a following, which is totally stupid. Like we'd worked so hard to get people to come to our shows, and then then we started doing these shows around Richmond where people were showing up that we didn't know. We would, and I remember around that time we had two more shows set up after that Jersey thing, and they were early. All the shows in Richmond at the time were very, very early. So like doors were at like 6, the show's over by like 9:30, 10.
Sounds fantastic.
I just remember there being like lots of, the last 2 shows, there were like lots of kids there. And just, it was crazy to me because that should have been a huge indicator that you should not stop playing. But
you have a final show?
We did. So we did the final show thing for sure. So we played a final show. There's some footage of it on YouTube, and it was totally packed. It was totally, Twisters was way sold out, and we actually had that benefit of playing a final show. The reason why we did that is because Mark, who I ended up playing in River City High with, and who we're still the tightest homies ever, Inquisition, the band that he was in, never had a final show. They just kind of like broke up on stage, kind of.
Oh man.
But they didn't have an announced, this is our final show, come to it. So he was like, you want to do that? Like, you want to have a final show? And I was like, okay. So we booked this final show, and it was really great. It was wonderful. We did. Matt actually came down to the show.
How'd you guys meet Matt anyway?
Through Vinny from Less Than Jake. He just said that there's this kid who lives in New York who is
punk rock as fuck.
yeah, he's just active. He loves bands, and I think he's into Fun Size, and we met on that tour, and he was super. It was another one of those first times where I met a total stranger, and he this is what he said. This altered my course of life, and substantially in a lot of ways, because he said the lyrics for Glad to See You're Not Dead they're my favorite lyrics. This would have been 1998, so it's my favorite lyrics of 1998, and a lot of times my lyrics they're really bad.
Really?
That way, some of them, and even the guys in the band would give me shit sometimes about some of the lyrics, and I just remember being like, "You hear that, guys? this guy Matt says it's the best lyrics of 1998." Just trying to get affirmation from someone around me.
I gotta say something though. Like Matt, when we got on the label, I didn't know Matt, and then when we got on the label, I got to know him, and I thought he was like the nicest guy. Like the shitty thing is later on, like we parted ways in a really shitty way. So did he and I. Oh, okay.
Terrible.
Right. Okay. Well, I just want to say though, but when I first met him, I kind of looked up to this guy because I respected his opinion, because when he came to me one time, and I mentioned this in an earlier episode, and he was like, you got to check this band out. They're going to be the next big thing. And he played it. It was Newfound Glory before they put. It's like right before Nothing Gold Can Stay came out. It was a demo.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
heard Jordan's voice, and I was like, I was like, is this a girl? Like,
Right.
and he was like,
Right.
no, it's a guy singer. I'm like, I don't know, dude. I don't know. And then all of a sudden they just blew up. But I always respected his opinion about bands. So by him saying that to you, like,
Yeah.
I always thought that he had really good insight. I thought on music. So that
He really
like,
was one of those guys who
just
yeah,
got
he
it.
knew who was gonna do well. Like he always had a really good.
Oh, he always could tell who was going to blow
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing with Strike Anywhere. I mean, he was the
Yeah.
he got onto that before anyone else as well.
Polar Bear Club, Strike Anywhere. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like he
Yeah,
totally
I mean,
picked
Matt
all that
had
stuff.
like really really good taste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then we all burned bridges with him.
it's so sad. It's
Sadly.
like how honest do we have to be in this podcast? But like the River City High, just because of this is the perfect time to start talking about this.
Yeah.
Because of all this stuff with Fun Size had so many setbacks, and there were like I always wanted to do more, and it was like there was either like the band's inability to play or somebody not being able to do things in terms of like their jobs or girlfriends or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I was like, that's done. I'm over that. Like I want to do everything, and I want to do it, and I want to finally, and at that point I graduated, River City High was like, I had 2 more semesters of college, and I was like, I'm done with college. I'm not going to find a job. I'm going to play music. So
I remember that. I remember you guys, because you guys left that tour. We heard Fun Size broke up, and then you guys came back up, and we did, like, I think a weekend together. It was us, you guys, and then Saturday Supercade. Yeah, because we played that show in Binghamton where Saturday Supercade played, or it was like they played and you got up on the Moog and played it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you guys came back up as River City High. So like, how did you? And I remember that too, because you were very driven at that point. I think I remember having this conversation. You were like, I graduated. I'm not going to college. This is what we're doing. And you guys were like, it's like I felt like you and Mark were very like focused on where you wanted to go. And then you guys had kind of a revolving door of members at that point. After we'd always see you guys, you'd have someone new, and it was like you guys were kind of like, we're going in this direction, and we're going to treat it as more professionally, I guess, than the first time around of our other two bands.
So serious, right? Yeah.
Did you guys have that conversation before you started River City High, like the two of you?
Yeah.
I kind of threw a lot at you there, like so.
No, that's really good. Yeah. So Mark was right after the last Fun Size show. This guy Curtis wanted to start a band, and he and I had been talking. He's like, let's start playing together. And so I started to actually. So for the first time in my life, I was looking at what else I would do. My whole life up to that point had been never playing in a band with anybody else other than these other 3 dudes. I mean, Fun Size was my life from 12 to 20 years old.
Yeah.
That is like an incredible amount of time for when you're that young. That's the amount of memories that you're creating are like the biggest memories you'll have.
Well, I mean, it's your identity. It's your identity
right.
At that point.
Right. So, so I started playing with this dude named Curtis, and we had a drummer, and it wasn't really working out. So he's like, what about Alan? So Alan comes over, and we kind of start playing together again. So it's like, Alan and I back together again. This is fun. And then we were looking for a guitar player, and Mark was like the final person to come into the mix. And Mark and I had met from Inquisition shows. Inquisition was my favorite band locally. I loved that band so much. So I was always a big fan. So it was crazy when Mark stepped in to kind of like to play to kind of try out for our band. And Mark, he was at the time he owned a restaurant. He had kind of been out of playing music for a bit, but he was interested in getting back into it. And he also apparently had a mutual respect for me. I guess he appreciated the fact that I liked punk rock, but it was obvious that I had other influences as well.
Okay.
He and I spent a lot of time talking about, and I was 21. How old was I at this time? I was 20 years old at this time, right? So I wasn't even 21, but Mark owned a bar, but I didn't even really drink. I identified as straight edge at the time, right?
Yeah,
So,
I think I remember that. I think I remember that. Okay.
I'm going to Mark's bar. I've never been to a bar before, really. And he's sitting across from me, we're talking, and I'm like, I love Joe Jackson. I love Elvis Costello. And Mark's like, that's crazy. I also love Elvis Costello, you know? So we started talking about things that weren't just, pop punk stuff.
Yeah.
And stuff that, Mark really, like, he thought Green Day was great, and he liked Dag Nasty and the Descendants, but he also didn't go deep. Like, we were all just like, Fun Size was all just like worshipers of the style of music that we played.
Yeah.
And we listened to those bands, and we only played, and we listened to those bands, played music by those bands, and then that was mostly the thing, like we had some outside influences, but that was kind of our deal. So I had started to listen to more stuff, and Mark he found that in like an enticing thing to be in a band with somebody like that as well. So
yeah,
Mark's the fourth person for us to bring into the mix for this new band. And so Mark's like, if I'm going to do this, like, I really want to, I have a restaurant and this is fine, but if I'm going to play music, like, we need to really focus. And Mark is like the most motivating person of all time, still to this day. Whenever we get together and talk, it's like, he has this thing, he's got this charisma, and if you get behind him, I mean, he's just a very, very charismatic person.
Yeah.
And I totally needed that in my life at the time.
Yeah, I felt like he kind of like honed you in. Like, not honed you in, but like kind of like he kind of saw like what you had and gave you like kind of things on how to focus you more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's never been, he's an incredible editor when it comes to, I would write all these lyrics down and Mark would be like, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit, just do these two things. And I'd be like, thank God someone told me not to do those things. It's just like, he's so good at just kind of like, he's like, we should do this, you should, cut this down. We should wear this on stage, and I don't know if Mark is now Ryan Gosling and Aaron Rodgers' stylist.
Yeah.
Did you know this?
I just found out about this, which was like blew me away.
It's so awesome.
Random.
I mean, he's doing so well. It's like, makes me so happy. I love talking about it.
Yeah.
He's like someone's kid, like doing awesome. Like, I just love it. He's like, because he's one of the best people ever existed, in my opinion.
Yeah, the guy has a very interesting life, but go on.
It's really impressive. The stuff that he's been able to do, it's just he really just out of nothing. He's just always had us. He has something about him. So
I think it sounds like he has some people just have a vision, and if they try to do it themselves, it's like they're better off having it focused on like being a part of it, but having people surround them to help them bring it out of them. And I remember when you guys played with Fun Size, you were straightforward, pop punk, just you got up on stage, you jumped around. I remember who was the guitar player? Brian, Brian had like crazy stage presence. He was always he had this weird like jump where he did like this like his legs, like, I forgot when I saw it, they both like were parallel to the ground, then he'd come back down, and like he was just like all over the place. And
exactly.
When you guys came up at River City High, you guys had this stage performance, kind of like Mark would sit there and throw his pickup in the air and do all this crazy shit.
Right. Yeah.
So
it was just like, we started like, we're a rock band. Like, this is our thing. Like, we're gonna, and we're gonna tour, and we're gonna say yes to everything, and we're gonna try to do this.
Yeah.
And so many talks with Mark about like what we needed to do, and it took a bit to kind of find the core group of members that could basically, the idea was just to tour all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's, we wanted to ultimately, be on a good label, and like we had to get out of Richmond to do that. And so this leads us to, and we started talking about this because of the Red Leader thing, where I was like, with Matt Rosenberg and Red Leader, where it just felt like we just kind of plowed through a lot of these really wonderful connections I had made in Fun Size. Matt was obviously because he was a fan of Fun Size, he offered to release the first River City High release.
Yeah,
And
the 4 songs, right? The EP.
right,
Yep.
exactly. And I was super psyched. Like, this is going to be great. And then right after we put out this EP, the guitar player, the guy that I basically started the band with, wanted out of it. And I think that it was just too much for him. He could already see what like Mark and I had envisioned, where it was just like, we're going to be gone all the time. Like, we're going to take no prisoners, and we're just going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I think he was like, oh God, these people are insane.
He was the dude with the really long beard.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah. I have pictures of all these shows we played back in the day.
That's so fun. Yeah. I mean, and he's still around. He's a great dude.
Yeah,
it's
super nice
It's
guy.
so hard to imagine that, like, he's basically the reason why we started this whole band. It's like this dude Curtis.
Wow.
So he's gone, and Mark and I are like, well, we need to find somebody to replace him quickly. And
you got Cam from Cam.
And then
right?
Cam, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Cam from Lazy Cane comes in.
Lazy Cane, that's it.
Right. And Cam he knew a lot. From Lazy Cane days, he knew like a bunch of people. Cam's like a very connected dude. So immediately we met Rama from Big Wheel through Cam.
Oh wow.
And Rama that's when Big Wheel started kicking into high gear.
Yeah.
And that's when Big Wheel and Doghouse were starting to team up together.
Oh, that's right.
And so within like a month of Cam being in the band, Rama's like, we want to repress this. Because at that point you couldn't really get the Red Leader EP was already kind of out of print.
Yeah.
It was kind of hard to find. And Rama's like, we need better distro for you. We need this EP. And we need to if you really want to get your name out and start doing this for real, you need better distribution. You need a better label. and it was presented in no uncertain terms that we needed to get the record from Matt and re-release it on Big Wheel.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And it was super unfortunate because we just basically took this thing from this dude and gave it to somebody else. And at that point, also, Alan, who played drums in Fun Size, who was playing drums in River City, we had already replaced him with another drummer.
Yep.
And I had made these like 2 massive decisions where I was just basically cutting my umbilical cord from like safety. I was just plowing over these, like, in the name of advancing my own career. I was just like, walking over these like massively, wonderful people and our connections that we had made. And it really, in retrospect, it needed to happen, Yeah. It really did. Like I could have handled everyone. I always think I can handle things better. But I was also a kid at the time. So you don't really think about how it's going to affect you years later. You're just like, I'm 20, 21 years old. This is what's going to happen. Yeah. We're just going to take this record. We're going to give it to somebody else. Sorry, buddy.
I mean, we did the same exact thing with Stories. We took it. He did.
What a bunch of assholes.
Well, that's like to this day. I mean, there's a couple of things with this, and it's so funny because your whole story, I find so many parallels to things. I'm not going to talk about myself, but I'm just really connecting to a lot of things that you've done, where I'm like, shit, I felt the same way. With Matt was a guy who loved music, and now there's a bunch of different sections of people in the music industry or music scene. It's like the people who love it, and then there's the business aspect. And if you marry the two, you have to go and say, look, like, you could be a fan, but the business aspect is going to be the deciding factor of a lot of shit. Right. And Matt he loved the scene so much, and he did it, but he went into it and he couldn't repress things. And we were bands on the road that wanted to progress, and it was just that, hey, we need this record. And he's like, well, hey, you still got to pay me for this, Yeah. And they were like, we're all young kids. So the way it ended back then, the way you split as well, I mean, again, we were 20, 21 years old. 20 years later, we can obviously look back in hindsight and say, wow, that was really shitty. But at that time, it was, it was do or die in these bands because this is all we had to do. And it was just really poor fucking decision making. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's almost like I can self-reflect on the way that we took the record from Matt, because we took it, we just put it out on, like, Sean just put it out on a record label that he just made up on the spot. Right. And we did the same thing. We did the same thing with like 2 Hep records. We didn't take it, but we just couldn't pay it back. And it's like you have to be able to look back and be like, hey, I understand it, but to hold a grudge to this day, and I don't know if that's the case. It's just kind of like I don't understand how that can even happen, and I don't want to like dive into that. But if that is the case on your end too, it's kind of like you kind of have to just get over it.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, I regret a couple things, but I feel like they all needed to happen for us to move forward. So. Yeah. Alan and I have spoken at length about how we replaced him with another drummer. We worked through it. We kind of stopped talking for a couple years, but we're still best friends.
Is he back in Fun Size?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he was Fun Size was always going to be. Yeah, I mean, he was. Yeah. It was. I mean, it has to be. Alan and I started the band together when we were children, so yeah, it would have to be that.
So going back to so you get the record. At this point, you guys are on Big Wheel and Doghouse, or like Doghouse was the distribution, or
it was Ramo kind of like attached himself to Doghouse, and the idea was that they were going to combine forces. Ramo was kind of like A&R in a way for Doghouse. So Doghouse had his own bands, Big Wheel had their own bands, but there were going to be certain bands that they were going to team up with together. And River City High was going to be the first band that they were going to do this.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And we were going to be this like experiment for how they were going to like combine forces. And, this all happens within like a month after Cam is in the band, and we just happened to pick up with Rama at this time. And obviously our drive was we were very palpably driven at the time. Mark was doing his best Mark, where he was just like talking up the band the entire time.
Yeah.
And like we were ready to roll. So we recorded our first EP solidly for Doghouse Big Wheel. And
does that Forgets Their Manners?
That Forgets Their Manners. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And then right as we're in the studio for that, we have basically 4 months of tour planned that summer.
Wow.
We got a booking agent. And which changed my life because I'd been booking shows up to that point. And we got an agent, and I couldn't believe how easy it was to do shows after that. I was like, this is crazy. Someone else is going to book our shows for us. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Wow.
I didn't know that was even possible. And I was like, so Mark and I were like, yes, do book everything. We'll play everything. And Cam was like, oh my God, you guys are crazy. I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, I read an account recently. Someone did an interview with Cam, and he said that it's funny because Cam lives basically across the street from me now.
Oh,
and I'm looking at his house kind of as I'm talking about this. Cam said I wasn't making enough money to be in River City High for as much work as we were doing, so I had to leave.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It's so funny. It's like, absolutely true. I mean, we were still like, we still were not. As a matter of fact, we charged ourselves to be in the band. We like in order to be in River City High, you had to pay $125 each a month, I think is what it was. Wow. And that covered the practice space and the van payment. So it was like, not only are you not gonna make any money, you have to pay to be in it.
Well, it's funny because I've been working for myself since 2006, right? And I got these people coming up to me now because it's like 12 years doing this, and I'll have people come up to me who want to be entrepreneurs, and they'll say like, hey man, like, can I give you some advice and stuff? I'm like, sure. It's like, I charge like $150, $200 an hour for advice. And they're like, wow, what the hell? I go, look, if you're going to do something, the moment you pay for it out of pocket, you got skin in the fucking game, and it makes it real. So I can respect that now. If you're going to be in a band and doing this stuff, it's like, look, yeah, this is what it costs to be in a band. You got to go on the road. You got to put in your own money. And then eventually, if we keep doing this right, and if our songs are good enough and our crowd's there, it's going to work out. But it's not going to happen right now. But you have to fucking invest in it. So I see it from that perspective now, and I'm like, fuck yeah, you should have charged them.
Yeah,
you should charge them more.
Yeah. And it was this great trade-off. Cam joined the band for only like 4 months. We met people that were going to alter the band's career kind of through him, and then he pieced. It was just like really great thing where he just like rolls in, introduces us to a booking agent and a label, and then he's out.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for that. That was crazy. I mean, he was really only in the band for like 4 months, but
yeah, because we played. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you because my mind just goes back then, and I remember this. We played with you guys. We played with Curtis and you guys up in Massachusetts area, and then we saw you guys again right around the time when this whole Big Wheel thing happened at Mac Rock.
Yeah.
We came down
Right.
from Mac Rock, played with you guys, or like we saw you guys, and you were telling us about that. And I think that was like the time where Cam, I think he was with you, and then we played.
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like that was probably his last show.
Yeah, because we played some show with you guys in an Elks Lodge or Legion Hall somewhere. I think it was in Virginia, because that was when we went to the Hole in the Wall and we played that show at Twisters with you guys, and then I think we played Mac Rock with you, like
Right.
at the same time. So I was like, I'm vividly remembering all this, but sorry.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we were recording the EP. At the same time that a Mac Rock show was happening. Actually, we had to leave to play it, and Cam was already like, I'm out, but I'll do this EP. And so it was, and there was like no hard feelings. It was totally understood, we just had to find someone else. And we found, which by the way, we had to go back, since we're primarily talking about Jersey. River City High's first show was actually in Jersey. So Fun Size had such a really good connection with the South Jersey scene. This dude named Christian booked a bunch of shows in the Cherry Hill area.
Okay.
So Fun Size had really, really great times playing there, and that's where River City High started their career. Was our career was we played our first show.
That's wild.
Cherry Hill, Marlton area.
Wow.
So yeah, this guy Christian was always like super helpful with Fun Size, and it was a really good scene down there. So Cam, we're recording this Forgets Their Manners EP, and we need to find another guitar player, and this dude I know was just like, he actually, this guy John, who is playing bass, he's played bass in Jack's Mannequin, and he's in the audition right now.
Yeah.
He's just like he's just one of the best musicians in the world. This guy John's amazing. He's like, I know this guy Bob, you need him. You should ask him to join. And we did not know who he was. All I know is that he taught guitar lessons at this place called Guitar Works, which is in this kind of white people shoppers district. Okay. and I walked into Guitar Works, and I was also, at that point, I was like extremely full of myself. And I went up to the front desk, and I was like, is Bob Anderson here? And they said, he's in the middle of a lesson. And I said, cool. I walked upstairs where the lessons were. And it's funny because he was teaching a kid how to play Damn It by Blink-182. And so I'm like walking up the stairs, and I hear bang, 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 and I was like, I guess that's the guitar lesson. So I just like walked down there. I opened the door, and he's like teaching this kid how to play this riff. And he's handed my number, and I'm like, you should call me later. I just walk out.
Oh my.
Yeah, right. Like, and so like, and then he calls me up, and I tell him that we're looking for a guitar player, and
he calls up. He's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, and he, we give him the EP, the Red Leader / Big Wheel EP.
Yep.
Richmond Motel was what that was called, and he comes to practice, and he's phenomenal. He's like, he learns it all in like 2 seconds, and it's not a problem for him, and he's got a good voice, and he can sing, the actual what's like the classic River City High lineup is solidified,
Yeah.
And we hit the road.
Yeah, like, so like talk about like because did you guys feel this bump in like kind of a wave when you went on the road at this point, because you had Fun Size kind of at the name, I'm sure it kind of echoed a little bit on the road before you got there, but then you show up with this, and you got Big Wheel behind it, which back then that's when labels really started kind of giving you another bump. So you're on the road. Are you seeing shows getting bigger? Are you going on tours with bigger bands?
Yeah, for sure. So having getting our first experience with like having a booking agency, and we're just playing we're just playing with bands that we never would have had access to, and then he's like nice enough to throw me a couple shows, and we do this Less Than Jake Newfound Glory show. Wow. Like a few of them. And this was like right as Newfound was starting to blow up. But they were obviously opening, for Less Than Jake at the time.
Yeah.
So, we get to play like a few shows like that, which are like massive. and River City High does pretty well. I remember this, we played this Less Than Jake Newfound show, and we sold 100 CDs, which was crazy. Yeah, which was crazy, yeah. So it's like, it was like, I was like, this this is great. We could actually start we can actually start doing all the shit that we're talking we could actually really do. But we stayed gone, that first summer, and we kind of skipped over how the drummer Jay, who's like the best drummer I've ever played with in terms of like skill. I mean, he's an amazing drummer. He's still, he's playing talk shows still. He's in Andrew McMahon's band.
Oh my God.
Still to this day. I mean, he's a total badass. When we kind of parted ways with Alan, Jay was like living in Harrisonburg, going to college, and someone was also like, you should talk to this dude Jay. And Jay knew Fun Size, and he was looking to play music, and he was willing to drive like the 2.5 hours to Richmond to play. And next thing you know, we have this incredible drummer, so it was like we had this incredible guitar player and this incredible drummer, and there's this like loudmouth guitar player and me, who's like kind of between everything, like really just feel myself like an observer around all these people. So we have this really good chemistry and this great lineup, and we have like, Jay and Bob are super talented, and Mark and I are like less talented, but we were the ones that had a little bit of expertise in punk rock and whatever, navigating music. And so everything's like divided up pretty well. We have this like pretty solid line of stuff, and Mark and I are primarily the songwriters. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So we hit the road for 4 months. So we toured we toured from May until September. And it's unbelievable. We end up by the end of the summer, we went out with the Juliana Theory for like 3 weeks, and those shows were huge. And we did a couple weeks with Papa Known. Do you remember Papa Known? Do you remember this band?
Papa Known sounds really familiar.
Yeah. They're on Deep Elm. They're awesome.
Yeah, Deep Elm. I remember that.
They're wonderful. So, we did a couple weeks with them, and like 3 weeks with the Juliana Theory, and we got those Less Than Jake Newfound shows, and just this like really great summer of really great shows. And then that ends, and we're like, we got to write our first full length. So we come home, and Mark and I sit down to start writing the full length, something I'd never done, which is like, we got to write a record. I've never in my life at that point been like, we have to write a record. What does that look like? Like, well, we have to do it. So let's do it. And Rama calls me and tells me that Rama from Big Wheel calls me and says that we're going to do Jimmy Eat World wants to come to the East Coast. And we want to do 10 shows with Jimmy Eat World. And they were like one of my favorite bands at the time.
This is like when Clarity came out too, right?
It was just after Clarity. They had just left Capitol, and they were basically looking for what to do next. So it was like, so they weren't even on. They had recorded Bleed American, but they hadn't figured out what label really it was going to go to yet.
Wow.
So this would be October of 2000, and there was a lot of River City High buzz at the time. We were going to play CMJ with Jimmy Eat World at CBGB's. And it was this kind of thing where just people started taking notice of River City. And I remember Victory writing us and being like, we really want to sign you. And I didn't really know what to say, because I was like, this is great. We're getting all this attention. We're kind of signed to Doghouse, but maybe we can sign to Victory too. I don't know. I don't see how this could be a problem. And at the same time, someone had told MCA, this guy who worked in a mailroom at MCA, had straight up given our CD to an A&R guy and was like, this is one of my favorite bands. You should look into this band. And another story about like some dude just handing off a CD to somebody else and just being like, this is a great thing.
Wow.
So, and then this guy gets in touch with us. His name's Hans, and he writes us out of nowhere. And he's like, I like your band a lot. I want to sign you. And we were like, this is it. Like, this is what we've been working for. This is why we've been gone for 5 months, or toured for 4 months. And Hans is like, I want to sign River City High. Snag, and the plan though is that we're already signed to Doghouse.
Right.
We figured we don't really know how money works at the time. We figure like MCA wants to just like, they'll just buy our contract out from Doghouse, and then here we go. And then Dirk from Doghouse is a little more like, it's not going to be that easy, you know. Like, we agreed to put out this record. I'm going to do this first full length for River City High. Like, this is what we agreed to. And begrudgingly, we accepted our fate. We were like, this is I guess how it's going to have to go. So we went ahead with Won't Turn Down, and Hans is like, I'll get the next one. Just wait. I'll be around. Which is actually how it ended up happening. So we were, and everyone keeps telling, you know, all the Big Wheel and Doghouse keep telling us, because at that point we had 2 EPs only, and they're like, you have your first full length, your doors are going to open wider. You know, no one cares about a band with 2 EPs. You need a full length behind it. So we just put everything into it, and we got this guy named Tim O'Hare to produce it / record it.
I've heard that name before.
Well, after he did us, he did the big All American Rejects record. But before that, he had done the Sam I Am Astray record, which is wonderful.
Yes, that's why I know. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he had done Sebado, and he lived up in Boston, so he had done a lot of stuff for Boston. He'd done a Juliana Hatfield thing. He just was like a man on the scene up there working at Fort Apache. So he was just a really incredible guy. My time spent recording with him, I was about this would put us at like the summer of 2000. Like, it was around March, April, May, June of 2001.
Yeah, because it's saying Won't Turn Down came out in 2001.
Right. I was 21 years old at the time, and I was just really starting to actually like mature as like a fan of music.
Yeah.
And you know, I was reading that book, Please Kill Me. I don't know if you know this book, by Legs McNeil. It's just about how the New York, it's basically how punk rock started in America.
Okay.
And all these bands I didn't really know about, you know, I'm reading about it and I'm like, I don't know what television sounds like. You know, I don't know what, you know, I mean, I like the Ramones enough, but I didn't know the Stooges. I didn't know the MC5. I don't know the New York Dolls. Tim is like steeped in this music, and he's like, oh, you need to check these bands out. So like, I get this like wonderful music education from Tim while we're recording this record. And meanwhile, River City starts to plan like what ultimately becomes like what we plan on, like our biggest tours that we'll end up going on. And the summer of 2001, we hit the road again after the record's done, and we do, you know, a lot of Warped Tour, and just, you know, it's like really, really productive summer for us. And the album slated to be released on, you ready for this? September 11th, 2001 is the release date for Won't Turn Down.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it's really great, right? Yeah.
Oh man.
Right. And that's if you look on like All Music, I think that's what I think it says like 9/11 2001.
Fuck.
Yeah, so that was a Tuesday, which is when records used to come out.
Yep. I think
so yeah. So yeah, that's that, if that is not significant for the disaster that would end up being our band, I don't really know what is.
Oh shit. I thought, because at that, I moved out to LA 10 days before 9/11, and I was watching this is when the internet was like, it was, you know, it started to come out, and, you know, there was no Facebook, there was forums, but I was watching bands, and I remember kind of like, you guys always caught my eye because I was like, shit, man, they're still doing it, because I was out there from 2001 to 2004, and you guys would pop up in, you know, AP magazine or just some random articles or things I'd read online about you guys. And it's just like, you had your established sound, and I saw it progressing in that time period too, like after 2001. But it seems like you guys just couldn't catch like where you're trying to go after that.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of like a long way around. Like, I was watching it and I'd see like all these bands, like, you know, 2000, 2003, like Take It Back Sunday comes out, and I mentioned this a lot, like Brand New, and then you guys have kind of like stuck it out through this time, and then these things start happening around you where it's like, I felt that your sound was not going in the same direction as these newer bands, which might have been a bit of a bitch.
Exactly. So because we put out this, we got a little bit ahead of those bands by putting out, you know, and touring heavily, like in this like summer or two preceding when all those bands started getting big. So we had like kind of a foothold in a lot of ways. And then these, and all these bands have started coming up, and they were opening these shows, and it was like, Brand New, Taking Back Sunday, Coheed, they're all starting to come out, and they're opening these shows, and it's just obvious that like, and starting line is another example, and it's like, they are all gonna get real big. People are coming to the shows, see these bands, and at that point we're like still headlining, and we're not doing as well, and it's extremely discouraging because you can already we're trying to figure out ways, we're trying to blame it on something, it's the distro, it's basically like, it's just the way that the sound was at the time. We were just trying to do more of a straightforward, like almost rock and roll thing.
Yeah, I saw that too. You guys you had the kind of like a bit of a country sound, I thought, towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, it just started like, we started getting farther away from whatever that particular thing was, but our whole, the entire time that we're touring extremely heavily, we were just thinking like, we're going to get on MCA. It's going to be a bigger thing, So it's kind of like this kind of carrot that we kept like keeping in front of us the whole time.
Yeah.
We're going to be on this label. It's going to be wonderful. So
Won't Turn Down comes out 2001.
Yeah, exactly. We tour. We do an American tour with, we open for this band called Lucky Boys Confusion. And then we tour Europe, and we tour with H2O for a while.
Jesus.
Yeah. And then we tour Europe with this band called the Beatsteaks, which is unbelievable.
Really?
So it's our first trip to Europe. This band is still together in Germany. They're this wonderful, wonderful band that is, at this point, they're massive. They were big then, and they're just like extremely huge now. And they're just like this incredible punk rock band. I mean, they're fucking awesome. So we get this wonderful break where we get to open for this band in Europe, and we play these really huge, wonderful shows. Come home, do a full America. The America tour doesn't really go super, super well, but it goes okay. But it kind of ends on like kind of like a bittersweet note. But at that point, like, we come home, and that's when Hans from MCA is like, all right, this is we're gonna move forward, and we're gonna acquire the next Brucey High record. So they buy our contract out from Doghouse, and this is now, we're at 2002. This is the summer of 2002 is when River City High takes all the time off from touring, and we're gonna like write our major label debut record. All our friends around us are all signed to majors now. Everyone's famous. Like, we did all these Newfound shows. Newfound's huge.
Yeah, they're at MCA at that point.
Right. Like there's just basically all these bands that we know that we've been friends with, that we're touring with, they're all massive. Jimmy Eat World's already signed at that point. Bleed America's out. They're huge. And so, we just like, we felt like it was like, it's our time, here we go. And so we got a practice space in kind of near where I live now, in downtown Richmond. And we spend every day writing these songs, and we come up with about like 35, 36 songs. It's wonderful. Like, I'd never been this productive in my life. And Bob actually starts writing more songs himself. So we start interviewing producers, which is always an interesting thing you do, where your A&R rep sends out your music to all these producers, and they get in line to do it, and they either want to do it for a paycheck, or they want to do it because they're into the band. You kind of can't really tell. Maybe it's a little bit of both, art and commerce. And we have this like really crazy summer where we're writing songs, and we're also like meeting with producers, and we make yet again like the worst decisions ever. Like we end up going with a producer that was like the worst idea we could have ever done. Oh, man. It's like, we had a chance to record with this is just crazy. So the first guy we talked to, this is where the stories actually get good. All that other shit we talked about sucks. So,
I like it. I'm enjoying it.
This is just when it starts getting really fun. So we meet with Roy Thomas Baker. Roy Thomas Baker is the guy that he recorded fucking Bohemian Rhapsody. He's done the Cars. He was an engineer on T-Rex Electric Warrior. I mean, he's a legend. I mean, he built the console that Bohemian Rhapsody was recorded on because he couldn't have enough tracks for Freddie Mercury's voice. I mean,
Jesus.
he's like a legend in recording. And he lives in Arizona, and he's interested in recording our band. We talked to him, and I remember we're on the phone, and Mark's like, so it's come to my attention that you haven't really had any hits recently. Does this concern you? Like, Mark, what are you doing?
Mark asked this.
Yeah, exactly. But this is like
no.
the stuff that the label is like telling us, like, you need to go with, they're obviously like, you need to go with somebody who's got like current hits, like stuff like that, so like we're getting this like this lingo, and we're feeding it back to these people we're interviewing. So we talked to Roy Thomas Baker. I talked to Lou Giordano, who's done every great record that I love, like Sugar, Copper, Blue. I mean, just these incredible 90s rock records. Lou's the man,
Yeah.
He's like, and he ended up he was doing the Atari's record that broke real big, when I'm talking to him. So Lou's another guy we talked to. He's totally interested. We talked to Butch Walker, of course, because everybody in that time talked to Butch Walker. That was like a rock band.
Oh yeah.
And then we talked to this dude named Arnold Lanny, who's a Canadian guy, and he's like, I own a studio. Come up and you can like just record in it. And Arnold's done all the big Our Lady Peace records, and he did that Simple Plan record that was like really big at the time. And he's like, I like to write songs with the band, so like come up and I have the studio, and we'll just record all this music for all this time. And Bob and Jay are really into that idea. I'm less excited about going to Canada in the winter, but I'm like, you keep it wide open. So we narrowed down to him, and we go. And the other people that are interested in us is this band called The Matrix, or this production crew called The Matrix. The Matrix had just produced the big Avril Lavigne record that had come out that summer. That first Avril Lavigne thing. So they were like a songwriting, recording, like triumvirate. And we go out to LA to meet with them and record like a demo, because the label's like, I don't really know if that's going to be good for your like rock sound. And it's this like amazing time that we have with them. We do 2 songs that I still have copies of them. I mean, the problem was when it was mixed, it didn't come back as like big and rock and roll as we wanted it to, but the ideas were like super solid. And the label, I don't think, was excited about spending money on it, but if we would have pushed them, we would have been able to do it with them. And that would have been like the perfect thing for us, because we could have gone to LA and made this record and like kind of have the label like put some money behind it. And maybe like the idea was like, they would have had to back it because they put a lot of money into it. That was like kind of what we were thinking. But because the finished product they sent us didn't sound like big and rock enough, I was given the responsibility to have to call them and tell them it's just not rock and roll enough. We're just not going to go with you. And it's like the worst, stupidest call I've ever had to make in my life, because this team just won like a Grammy or like recording this record. They're obviously super talented, and we were just making like the worst decisions ever as we were going, like, this is like so we decided to go to Canada, and like, and that is where we leave off in 2002, is that River City High is signed to a major. We've decided to go to Canada to make a record that's going to be like the record that's going to change our lives. We were given our first little bit of amount of money that we've never had touring. We never had any money. And then all of a sudden we each made like $4,000 each. Like we've never had $4,000 each in our bank accounts.
Exactly.
So I'm ready to buy a house with my $4,000. I'm like, this is going to be it. And then that's where 2002 ends. Now, fast forward, I'll just tell you what happened the next fucking year. We go up there to Canada. We record the record for like 4 months. I get E. coli. I get sick for a week.
Jesus.
We don't tour forever. When we finally come out of like hiding, no one gives a shit about our band anymore. And then the label goes bankrupt and the record never comes out. And it's a fucking disaster.
Oh my
God. But I couldn't.
So when did the black cloud actually go away from your life?
Nothing. But at the time, like the end of 2002 is this like wonderful period of like anticipation, where like we're moving forward and we have this like label that we think is going to make us rock stars, and we're ready to do this.
Yeah.
And then in 2000, and one thing that like kind of like solidified the fact that like we could handle it was we did a couple Blink-182 shows because of the MCA thing, the connection. We were able to get thrown on them, and there were just Coliseum shows, just massive, 10,000 people, massive, and we were fucking awesome. We played a few of these shows and we were so good, and we had our stage show down pat, and we were like, we owned it, and we did a really, really good job. And I really think that, you know, we could have held our own, and it was awesome. And you know, it's just like, it was a crazy feeling to be able to play in front of 10,000 people and the jet scream audience noise that I always read about at these Beatles shows when I was like a child.
Wow.
That I didn't know existed. And yeah, it was like it's a real thing. The lights go down and it's the loudest thing you've ever heard, and it makes you want to cry, and you can't believe that you're getting ready to play in front of that many people, and you do it, and it's awesome. And
that's so
I got to experience it, and I'm so happy I had that chance.
I mean, that's something that a lot of bands never got a chance to feel. I mean, granted, out of all of that, just to have that experience, sure, it's a lot of time, and I'm sure you obviously wanted more things to happen outside of that, but just even just to walk away with feeling that, like, I wouldn't say it's all worth it just for that, but that would definitely sweeten it a little bit.
Right.
I mean, at that time, it's kind of like bittersweet, obviously, but goddamn, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And you guys are also at this point too. I mean, and that's the era where you're kind of like fighting like the current about what like the music that's happening around.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we were at that. We just kind of like, I don't know if missed the boat is like, these adages that you just kind of like throw out there that kind of like try to sum up what went wrong.
Right.
But
yeah.
I mean, the only one I can think about is Miss the Boat. Just like, kind of the style of music that we were trying to do was just not, people just weren't necessarily interested in it. And so to react to that, we just started getting like, we just kind of like started to get more rock and roll, if that explains it. We were just like, we're just gonna like, we liked Thin Lizzy a lot, and we were just gonna try to be like a guitar driven rock band that was like kind of like as far from anything screamy or anything that was possible.
I think that's what caught my attention when I saw you guys later on. I saw like some photo shoot you guys did, and I was like, these guys are like super country looking and like super rock now.
So funny. Yeah. We just we were definitely not, I don't know what it was, whatever emo turned into, we definitely weren't that. Although we started off kind of just in the middle of that. We were never really were that in general, I didn't think. I mean,
no, you guys were always just you guys were very pop punk. I mean, Fun Size was very poppy, and then at the beginning of River City High there was like a slight rock element, but it was just like straightforward poppiness, but like, I mean, the first CD, I Wish on Every Nickel, it just opens up so well, and then anybody anywhere is so fucking poppy. It was like it was like a more mature sound of Fun Size, but then you just progress. It's like you just gotta go where you feel like you need to be.
we had to get something out there fast at that point. Like we didn't have anything. We had spent about a year and a half of our lives recording a record that was just never going to be released. So we had one EP left to do for Doghouse. And it's funny because the idea with that is that, labels do this. They retain like one record for when you're like huge. And then you have to go back and do this like record for this like small label, and it kind of like pays back the small label for like what they did for you earlier. And what it ended up doing is we ended up begging him to basically put it out because we had nothing left. Like we were like, please put out this EP. We have nothing out. We have to do something, and it's just like it's an endeavor. At that point we had like gotten used to like we didn't really it was just difficult. We didn't really have we were broke again. We had to use some of the advance money to like buy J cymbals. We didn't really have like we were spending too much money recording it because we were still kind of used to like the style of recording of like, we made a record in Canada for like 3.5 months. We're used to this like pace. We forget what it's like to just go in and just record stuff. So we're spending way too much money on this like dumb EP. And it's just like a slog. And by the time that's over, we go out of town to play like a week of shows, and it just feels like it was obvious that like we were just at each other's throats and everyone was just kind of over it. And we come back and we split up down the middle. Bob and Jay and Mark and I go our separate ways. And thus ends, the basically the 3.5 years of River City really trying to like be a band and make it.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And then Mark and I are like, we're not giving up. We're going to keep this thing going, which is awesome because, we're just, that's how we were at the time, and, loyal to a fault. And we do some great things. We won this like MTV contest, which is basically like this battle of the bands thing. And we got a lot of money that we were able to pay back. We had so much debt at that point because we had been putting money on a credit card everywhere we'd gone because the idea was the label's going to pay us back. MTV is going to pay us back.
Yeah.
Oh shit, they're bankrupt. I've got $25,000 worth of credit card debt under my name personally, and no one else, it was under my name. No one else in the band had a credit card. So, we needed a way to pay back this money. We won this contest. We were able to like pay back this money. And
wow.
So it was this really great thing. And that was like another thing that kept us going. Like we kept having these little things that kept kind of pushing us along. And the last lineup of River City High was awesome. It was this dude named Chip played guitar and this guy named Greg Brooks played drums. And it was just like, we were just a wonderful group of people. And we spent more time on the road kind of just promoting this very last record that we did. The wind was like not even out of our sails. The wind was like on another part of the continent, but we were still like just having so much fun. And our thing was just like, we're just gonna have a great time everywhere we went. And we did. We had like the most fun. My favorite memories are a lot of from touring that time. We just had a great time. We had so much fun. Just drank all the time. Didn't give a shit about anything. It was awesome, but it was never. We would never ever be able to like reach like the level that we were at before that. Meanwhile, Bob and Jay go on to be in Jack's Mannequin.
Oh wow!
And it was just this like, it was definitely this juxtaposition between like, look what they're doing and we're still doing this, and it was painful. It was super painful, and but that's just like how the chips fell. I don't really know. This is not really it. We became River City became this kind of the statistic where Steve Albini has this whole article about like why you shouldn't sign to a major label.
Yeah.
And it's everything that happened. I mean, he wrote this from experience, and I can't, it's like you think like this is not gonna happen to me. I'm just like but it did. It totally did. We did the exact same thing happened. So
yeah, I mean we'd always hear about that. There was like this Doghouse and those labels where they were big enough that you knew of them, but they weren't that massive thing like MCA where it was just a different entity or different animal when you had to deal with it. Because that's what just stupid money was being thrown everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was still a time where stupid money was being thrown around, which is obviously why record labels don't really exist that way anymore.
Yeah.
You can't. There was still that thing at the time where it was like, we have Green Day, and you can make other Green Days, and then it's like it just doesn't. It never worked that way. I mean, every band is unique and does their own thing, but people always try to like mimic the thing that does well and hoping that it does well for them as also, and that's not necessarily how it works.
So how did you guys did you have like a final show?
So didn't. So it's like
the two guys. So you didn't have a final show. So Mark giving you that advice with Fun Size to have a fun final show because of Inquisition didn't. His next band, he doesn't have one.
Right. Exactly. So Mark moved. Mark moves to. He actually moved to London for a while, and he just like he was flying back to America to play these horrible tours that we were doing, and it was just obvious that it was like we just what are we gonna do next? Who knows? And Mark's like, well, I'm in London, and we talked about we had this tour lined up to kind of go to Brazil, believe it or not, and the plane tickets were too expensive. We couldn't really afford. We were gonna have to pay for all of them individually, and it was just like too much of we couldn't figure out how to do it, and that was it. We couldn't really figure out how to get to Brazil. That was like kind of like our last plan. At that point, we were like, what else is there? But we never really ever said like, let's not do this. We just kind of kept saying we're gonna look for like whatever tours we kept looking at and getting offered. They were never really enough for us to be like, let's do this. So we just kind of like just took a step back and we never took a step forward again. It just kind of stopped.
Wow.
But really at that point, I just don't think it was such a insufferable end that even if we would have done a last show, I don't really think, because we didn't really have the core lineup anymore, and it wasn't really like, it just wouldn't have been the same. It would have been, River City was this thing where it was just like, it was Mark and I and people we kept trying to like keep around long enough to where we could like stay on the road. And I just feel like it didn't really have enough of an identity at that point. So what was the last show going to be like? I mean, I don't know if anybody would have even come. Like, we just had stopped drawing anywhere.
Oh, so even in like Richmond, like did the scene totally flip at that point?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. We at that we were like, exactly. It really, like, we had some folks that were into us, but for the most part, we just couldn't. We couldn't even draw around here anymore. Damn. So it's really weird how that happened. But I guess we stayed. That band was together for about 7 years. Fun Size was together about 7 years. It's just the different things that happened. Fun Size broke up. I was 21 years old. River City High stopped playing. I'm like 28.
Oh, totally.
Which is like a whole different time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for music and for me personally.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'd been gone from Richmond. We'd been gone out of town playing so many shows. We came back and it was like there's a whole different scene. Like when in 1998, I was like, in the middle of the scene.
Right.
2004, like that scene. I'm older, and that scene is like there's a whole different group of people.
Yeah.
Way different group of people.
It's funny too, because if you go to shows now, I've actually gone to see Taking Back Sunday play, and it's like they're almost. They can still play bigger shows, but I feel like actually no, because they were touring underneath Coheed and Cambria recently. It's like those bands that came in at that time, those are the ones that took the wind out of your sails as a touring band. But now I'm watching it happen to them. Like you could see these bands that came up in 2004, now they're struggling.
Really?
Oh
and
yeah.
And the cool thing about all those bands, every single one of those bands that we mentioned, Coheed, Taking Back Sunday, they've always starting line. Those dudes always say hi to me when they come through town. I've stayed in touch with a lot of them, and they're all still super great. They're really nice about talking about River City. I helped them out when they started, and it's really it's Coheed, especially like last time they came through. I spent like a whole night with those dudes. It's just really nice to hang with people who just remember. And the dude that I'm the tightest with, out of that whole scene is Brett from the Juliana Theory.
Okay.
He and I are like super close still. Like we're homies, we text all the time. He is the fucking coolest. And it's funny because Juliana Theory and River City High kind of did the exact same thing in terms of like career trajectory. Like we kind of we were very headstrong when we started. We were reviled by certain people in the scene. People hated Juliana Theory sometimes.
Well, it was funny because there's been some episodes. There was a show we played in. I've talked about this in so many different episodes. This has popped up. There was a show in I think it was Wayne. Yeah, it was Wayne, New Jersey, the Wayne Firehouse. And
yeah, we played the show.
Yeah, was that the show where Juliana Theory went around and unplugged that one band?
Uh-huh.
So we've talked about it in episodes, and we all talked about how it was. And like, there's moments where I'm sure they're probably super cool guys now, but like they pissed so many people off.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
it's like people still remember that shit.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, like. Yeah, you do that. You know, there's always
you do that one thing, and everyone's like, "Fuck that shit." And you're like, "Well, that was like 2 decades ago. Like, sure, it was bad then, but."
River City High had a couple things like that. We showed up to a town, and we showed up at Lucy's Records one time in Nashville, and a huge storm had just come through, and the floor was full of water, and we walked in after this like 10-hour drive, and someone handed us like a mop, and they were like, "You want to play? Clean up." And we were like, "No, we just drove 10 hours. I'm not mopping the floor." And like we left, and we got the worst hate mail ever from that.
Really?
And yeah, people were so pissed off. They thought we were the biggest fucking rock stars, and we were just like, we just didn't feel like mopping the floor. We'd just been driving all day, and then like
that's some fucking bullshit. That I mean, if a venue has that stuff happen, that's the venue's fucking problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not
we got a lot of that. Seemed to always happen in River City. You know, Mark was not afraid to be like, "Fuck that," and then we would not play. We stopped playing house shows. Mark was like, "No more house shows. I'm tired of playing next to people's dryer." That's exactly what he said. He's like, one time in Inquisition, someone's fucking laundry was done, and we had to like move out of the way while they like folded their towels. He's like, "I'm never doing that again." And people would be like, "Play this house show," and Mark was like, "No," and they're like, well, "You're dicks." So like we always just seem to some band takes too long. Mark knocks on the window, tells the dudes like 5 more minutes, and the dude like loses his mind, and everyone thinks River City High is a bunch of assholes. We got that all the time. So Juliana Theory and River City High had typical like pretty similar trajectories, and they signed to a major and it ended up in disaster instead of ours.
Oh man.
So yeah.
You guys came together just to be like, well, we got a lot of people hating on us right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. People love to hate both of our bands.
Well,
River City High was definitely easy targets because Mark's a fucking cowboy hat, and everybody like would make fun of that forever.
Well, I mean, Mark was pretty straightforward guy. Like he was kind of like no bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to kind of wrap this up a bit. So again, and you guys, so then Fun Size gets back together. I mean, granted, like I usually will stop around like 2000, but since you guys were a band back then you put out a record in 2013, which it was funny because I think when I reached out to you, I don't know if I think I found out about the record, and this was only like a couple months ago when I reached out, and I found out about the record then, so I started listening to it. And End of the Road has like been on my Spotify playlist for since we started talking. I like literally listen to that song seriously like every day because it's so fucking good. And I was reading some review on it, and it was kind of like you guys it's like you took what you had done back then and you finally built on it, and it was focused. And I felt that way when I listened to it. And End of the Road, there's like the second verse where it's just kind of like the muted part, and then it breaks in. It's like, oh, the times, and like that part gets me every time because it opens the whole song up so powerfully, and I'm like, I was like, I should be running right now. That song would just like fucking light me up.
Can't figure out. All the doors you slam and gotta bring it back. You kick and scream and it just gives you a heart attack. Watch yourself until you're blue and black. Can't get it right, just can't get it right.
But
thanks, man.
How did you guys because you got the original lineup back together, and I read that the original guitar player, you guys were going to do some stuff, and he had quit, so you got someone else to come in. But like I was surprised to see that it was the original lineup because I when I first saw it, I was like, oh, because everyone looks so different and Brian doesn't have the dreads anymore.
Yeah, right.
And Alan looked different, but I looked closely today and I was like, oh my god, it is the same fucking guys.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah, totally.
what brought that on, and then then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, right. It was a great time in everyone's lives. It just like was free time, like everybody. Alan had like he had a lot of free time. He wasn't really working that much. Now he owns this owns this business that's like renovating houses, and he's doing really, really well with it.
Nice.
But at the time, he hadn't really found his calling yet, so he had a lot of free time. And Brian was living in New York City, but he just moved back to Richmond, and I was, I'm always willing to play music still, so I still play. I have a band called Long Arms now, and we still play all the time.
Nice.
So it was just like, we'd always like toyed with the idea of what it would be like to make another record now that we're like older and
there's no pressure on it. And
yeah, exactly. And I'd been writing some songs that were like a little more like pop punk, and we were like, let's just try it and do it. And it ended up, I think I told you this, it ended up turning out way better than we thought it would.
Oh, it's so good. There's so many good songs on that record. Like anyone should go get it. It's called Since Last We Spoke. It's on Spotify or wherever, but like it's really fucking good.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. It's we were able to just like find the right speed for us, and we were able to take our time. It'd been a while since a lot of us had even played even recorded that style of music, so we just needed to go at a slower pace, but modern technology allows you to do that. You can spend a little more time doing stuff.
Absolutely.
So we it was that's what and it was just really fun, super fun to make, and everybody again like just couldn't believe by the end of the summer when that was done, I couldn't believe that we had this really great record.
What did you do with it? Like, did you guys put it out yourselves, or?
Yeah, same thing that always happens. Put it out, and then in the end. But I definitely am super satisfied with it. I can't. I'm very proud of all those guys. It was just a great way to hang out with those guys again and make more music. Because
how did you guys get all those flyers on like the wall and the floor for the video?
Yeah,
for the
I
video?
saved everything. I saved all our old flyers. I was so being a child and being because music was everything to me. I've always also been pretty organized, and I just I saved everything from Fun Size. I've got it all still.
Is there copies of flyers on that? Because there's so many. It covers the entire place.
Right. So yeah, I had all the original flyers, and we just made some copies of them.
It's amazing.
But they were all shows that we actually played. It was all real Fun Size shows from back in the day. We just had to. There's a few duplicates, but
yeah,
a lot of them
that.
are just like the original flyers that we had from those shows.
It's so cool. Like, you got to see the video. It's so badass. It's like the whole thing is covered, and I'm like, how the fuck did they do that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Yeah, it was really good. This it was perfect. The concept and everything all came along in a really fluid way. None of it was as difficult as a lot of things that I've done musically, where you just feel like you're forcing stuff.
Yeah, it's like you finally get to that place that you wanted to feel back in the day, but you're like, wow, this is enjoyable now.
Yeah, exactly. Too little, too late,
motherfucker.
But still, yeah, exactly. Story of my fucking life. But it's still it's great. I'm really happy that you like it, and that
yeah.
And that just kind of brought you brought us talking together, because it's really cool of you to ask me to run my mouth about my life for 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I basically do this. Like, I started this just because I just selfishly wanted to learn all of this stuff back in the day, and then it kind of lucked out that people are actually listening to it. It's just like it's kind of awesome. All right, so two more things before I ask one more question before I ask you like the last question I always close this out with. But is there anything right now that you want to plug to anyone listening that you check out?
Yeah, I play in this band called Long Arms now, and we just put out a record called Young Life, and I love it, and I want everyone to hear it. So check it out.
Is it on? It's
on all the things.
On the things.
Yeah, it's everywhere. You can find it. It's on everything.
And now I see Long Arms as 2 words as well.
That's right. It's fucking 2 words. God damn it.
That's right. No, James makes sure everything's 2 words.
Yeah.
All right, so this is how I end every episode. Oh God, the fucking question went away. What scene ethics do you still hold on to this day?
It's like I've been playing music and it was my teens, my 20s, and my 30s, and ethics and behavior or whatever is ethics are the thing that you need to hold on to, and behavior I guess changes as you get older, right?
Yeah.
But there's the one thing that ethically is it's supposed to be the solid foundation that's not supposed to change, and everything else has changed underneath it. And I've in various situations had to grow adapt my behavior for whatever kind of experience we were in musically for a band, because I don't think that I could being in a band with my best friends when I was 12 is different from when you're playing in Omaha, Nebraska with dudes that aren't necessarily your best friends when you're in your mid-20s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just at that point you're looking for different things in life, I guess is the best way to describe it. But I guess the one thing that I would say that I have to the basic foundation of all of it is love. You just have to love playing music. I mean, that's it. I mean, it has to start with that. You can't really do any. I mean, it's easy to say well, yeah, we all love music. You're but do you really? I'm 40 years old, as of last month, and I'm still playing shows and with varying degrees of success. But let's be honest, it's not really super successful, and you just have to really, it's that same feeling that you get when I was at a cookout in my old neighborhood, and I asked the bass player how do you tune your bass? Because I don't know how to tune my bass. But it's you just want to get up and you want to play music in front of people, and it's songs that you wrote, and it's this incredible feeling that you just can't get anywhere else. And that's it. You just have to love doing it.